You're not on the guest list. The woman at the front desk didn't look cruel. She just looked confused. I handed her the invitation again, the one in a cream envelope with gold foil lettering, the one my daughter Maisie had admired when it arrived. "Mom, you look beautiful," she'd said as I zipped up my best dress and fixed my curls. I wanted to cry then. Now I couldn't even speak. My name is Savina Cole. I work in a public school cafeteria. I wake up before dawn every day, cook in silence, and come home smelling like dishwater. I'm not glamorous, but I'm dependable. And for the past 7 years, I was the one who paid for my sister Ivy to become a doctor. $8,000 a year in tuition, over $1,000 a month for living expenses. Never once did I ask for anything in return. Yet, on the day of her graduation, Ivy stood next to our mother, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "This isn't your place anymore. Your role is over." And just like that, I stopped being the woman they could use. The banquet hall looked like something out of a dream. White linens, crystal chandeliers, gold accents glowing beneath soft lights. I'd never set foot in a place so grand. For a moment, I thought maybe today would finally feel like I mattered. The woman at the reception desk smiled politely before scanning the list. Her brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't see your name here." I blinked. "There must be a mistake. I have the invitation." I handed it over, heart pounding, fingers already trembling. She took it, checked again, and then I heard it. My mother's voice, low and sharp. "Savina, what are you doing here?" I turned. My mother stood beside Ivy, both of them dressed elegantly, both of them staring at me like I'd crashed a stranger's wedding. I was invited," I stammered. "This is Ivy's graduation, right?" "You weren't on the family list," Ivy said, not even blinking. "This isn't your place anymore." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean? I'm your sister. I supported you." "You were useful," she said. "You paid what needed paying. Your job is done." My mother added, not bothering to lower her voice, "You're a lunch lady. What are you doing here, among doctors?" It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. People began turning, whispering, watching. I looked down at the gift I held, something Maisie and I had picked together. My hands shook. "Please," my mother said, "go home. That dress is cheap. This is embarrassing." I stood frozen. Ivy didn't flinch. Her face was made of stone. She didn't even pretend to care. "Security," she said calmly. "Please escort her out." A man in a black suit approached me. "Ma'am." I didn't fight. I didn't speak. I just walked out, each step heavier than the last. The gift still in my hand, the invitation crushed against my palm. Outside, I didn't cry. I couldn't. But something inside me broke, and not quietly. I didn't go straight home after they threw me out. I wandered into the hotel lounge and sank into a leather chair, the gift still clutched in my lap. The air was quiet and cold, but inside me, everything burned. I had paid for all of it. And not just the tuition. I had funded Ivy's entire life for nearly a decade. It started when she was still a teenager. I was 28, already working full-time and raising Maisie. Our mother called one evening and said, "Ivy wants to go to medical school, but we can't afford it." She didn't even ask. She just waited. And like a fool, I said, "I'll cover it." I remember hanging up and staring at the cold coffee in my hands. I knew what I was agreeing to, but I also remembered Ivy as a shy little girl who clung to my leg, who said she wanted to be a doctor to fix people. I thought I was giving her a future, so I paid. $8,000 a year, quietly, automatically. I never expected her to pay me back. I just wanted her to succeed. But it didn't stop there. 6 months into her first year, she called crying. "Scholarships don't cover groceries. I don't have time for a part-time job. Can you help?" And so I did. $300 a month at first, then $500, then $1,000. Until every month, without fail, I was sending her more than I had to spare. I skipped haircuts. I stitched up old clothes for Maisie. We didn't go on vacations. I packed our lunches from scratch and cut corners wherever I could. Maisie never complained. She just hugged me when she noticed I was tired and said, You're the best mom. And I told myself it was all worth it. That Ivy would become a doctor, and maybe one day she'd look at me and say, "Thank you." But that day never came. I remember the moment it all cracked. It was a Tuesday. I was on break at work when a coworker said, "Isn't this your sister?" and handed me her phone. There was Ivy, lounging poolside in a designer swimsuit, a cocktail in her hand. The caption reading, "Work hard, play harder." I stared, scrolled. Another photo, Ivy smiling at a rooftop restaurant with 3 shopping bags at her feet. Chanel, Dior, and something I couldn't even pronounce. Spa trips, beach resorts, luxury brands. She hadn't been struggling, she'd been thriving, on my dime. And still, I might have said nothing. Until Maisie's 7th birthday. We decorated the house together, baked a homemade cake. I told Ivy weeks in advance, and she replied, "Sorry, I have a medical conference. I really can't miss it." Maisie tried to hide her disappointment. "That's okay, Mom. Doctors are busy, right?" I smiled, lied, told her Ivy sent her love. 3 days later, I opened Instagram and froze. There was Ivy, on a white sand beach, a drink in one hand, sunglasses in the other. The caption, "Weekend vibes with my girls. No conference, no excuse, just a lie." And that was the moment I stopped lying to myself. That night, I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling while Maisie breathed softly beside me. I kept hearing that beachside laugh, that cold voice at the party, those words echoing again and again, "Your job is done, you don't belong here." I had been used, not supported, not appreciated, just used. It wasn't just about the money, it was the lies, the indifference, the way Ivy didn't even try to pretend she cared, not about me, and worst of all, not about Maisie. That was the one thing I couldn't forgive. Ivy hadn't just dismissed me. She'd thrown my daughter aside like she didn't matter. No card, no message, nothing. Maisie had waited at the window that day, clutching her little gift for Aunt Ivy. I remembered her saying, "Maybe she'll come late. Maybe she'll surprise us." And I had told her, maybe. I hadn't protected my child from that hurt. I'd let her hope, and that was the moment I changed. I thought about everything I had given up, every small indulgence, every quiet night I'd spent worrying about bills, every moment I'd swallowed my pride and kept saying yes. I had allowed myself to become a background character in my own life. But I wasn't born to be someone's sacrifice. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen staring into my coffee. Grant walked in and saw my face. "Something wrong?" he asked gently. I looked up and whispered, "I'm done." He paused. "With Ivy?" "With all of it." I told him everything. The party, the dress, the security guard, the poolside lies, every shameful detail I had held in for years. He listened in silence. When I finished, he said only one thing. "Then let's take your life back." Those words landed like a rope being thrown to a drowning woman. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want drama. I wanted my power back, my voice, my peace. So I got up, I changed clothes, I brushed my hair back, and I went back to that hotel. The party was still going. I could hear soft music through the hallway walls. I rode the elevator up, one hand still trembling. Inside the ballroom, a man in a suit stood at the mic, praising Ivy as a future leader in medicine. She stood beside him, graceful, polished, the perfect daughter, the brilliant doctor-to-be. I approached the MC quietly. "Excuse me, may I say a few words?" He hesitated, but after a moment, he nodded and handed me the microphone. The whispers began as soon as I stepped into the light. "Good evening," I said. "I'm Savina Cole, Ivy's older sister." I looked at Ivy. Her smile vanished. "I came here today to celebrate my sister's achievement, but it seems I wasn't welcome, so I'll say this, and then I'll go." The room held its breath. For 7 years, I paid Ivy's tuition, $8,000 a year. I sent her living expenses every single month. I supported her while raising my own daughter and working full-time. I didn't ask for anything in return. I did it because I loved her, because we were family. Ivy started to speak, but I didn't let her. But earlier today, I was told I no longer belonged, that my role was over, that a lunch lady doesn't deserve a place among doctors. I looked straight at her. Her face was flushed, trembling now. "Well," I said, "if standing here makes me out of place, then maybe it's time you reconsider where you stand too." A low murmur moved across the room. I felt eyes on me, some stunned, some ashamed. I saw one elderly man shake his head slowly. Someone else whispered, "Is that true?" But I didn't stay to hear the rest. I handed the microphone back, my hands finally steady, and then I walked away, leaving the microphone behind, and with it, every ounce of silence I'd ever swallowed. Outside, I took a long breath. The night was cold, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. When I got home that night, Maisie was already asleep. Grant was waiting for me in the kitchen, his arms crossed gently over his chest. "How did it go?" he asked. I didn't speak right away. I just stood in the doorway, staring at the floor. Then I said quietly, "I told them everything." He nodded slowly. "And how do you feel?" "Clear." It was the only word that fit. I didn't feel lighter. I didn't feel free. But for the first time in years, there was no fog in my mind. The next morning, I made a decision. "The house," I said to Grant. "It's in my name. I've been paying the mortgage ever since Dad passed. They live there rent-free. I think it's time to make that stop." He didn't argue. "I'll drive you to the lawyer." At the office, I laid out every receipt, every signed paper, every document showing I was the one holding up the roof over their heads. The lawyer reviewed it all and said, "You have full legal rights. If you'd like to proceed with eviction, we can start with a certified notice." I signed the papers. 3 days later, the letter was delivered. I didn't expect a thank you, but I also didn't expect the phone call that followed. My mother's voice came through the line like venom. "What do you think you're doing? You're kicking us out? That house is our family home." I stayed calm. "Do you remember who's been paying the mortgage since Dad died?" Her silence was brief but telling. I continued, "You let me carry that burden for years. No gratitude, no respect. And now, after Ivy told me I didn't belong, after you stood by and said nothing, you still expect me to carry you? So you're just abandoning your family now?" She hissed. "I'm drawing the line," I said flatly. "Being family doesn't mean being used. I have a child to protect, a life to live. And frankly, if my role is over, then Ivy can carry you now. She's the doctor, isn't she?" There was silence. Then the call cut off. A week passed, then another. I didn't hear a word. Finally, the lawyer called. "They haven't vacated. We'll need to proceed with the formal eviction." I nodded. "Do it." I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't emotional. I was focused. I didn't want drama. I didn't want them to beg or cry. I just wanted my space, my peace, back. On the day of the eviction deadline, I drove to the house. I walked up the driveway that I'd once shoveled snow from, that I'd helped repaint years ago. And when I opened the door, the house was empty. Not a word, not a note. Just silence. And for once, that silence felt like relief. I walked through each room, remembering every slammed door, every dismissive look, every time I'd been made to feel small. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't abandonment. This was reclamation. I had given them years. Now I was taking mine back. The house felt different now. Not just quieter, but freer. For the first time, I could breathe without guilt pressing against my ribs. Still, there were moments I didn't know what to do with myself. The habit of carrying others doesn't just vanish. It leaves your hands feeling strangely empty. Then one afternoon, something happened. Something small, but it changed everything. I was in the school kitchen, rinsing trays, when I overheard 2 coworkers talking near the sink. "My son's doing okay in school, but college? We don't have a chance. Even with scholarships, it's not enough," one said. "Same here," the other replied. "I just wish kids who work hard had a real shot." Their voices echoed something I'd lived, something I'd survived, and something I could do something about. That night, after putting Maisie to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a blank notebook and a single thought. What if I could help someone else? Someone like Ivy. But who wouldn't forget what it cost to get there? I started writing. Names, ideas, requirements, possibilities. I talked to Grant. He offered me a small room in his real estate office to start from. I filed paperwork, applied for nonprofit status, and reached out to local schools. That's how the Savina Cole Education Support Fund was born. It wasn't easy. There were forms and fees, meetings and moments of doubt. But every time I looked at Maisie's face, I remembered why it mattered. 6 months later, we held our first scholarship ceremony in a modest community hall. We selected 3 students, each one from a background like mine. They were brilliant, determined, and barely scraping by. Their families sat in folding chairs, some holding hands, some crying. One mother came up to me after the ceremony and said, "Thank you. I didn't know people like you existed." I smiled. I used to think the same thing, but someone has to go first. On the way home, Maisie reached for my hand and said, "Mom, you were so cool today. I want to be like you when I grow up." Those words filled a space in my heart I didn't even know was still empty. Weeks passed. Then one morning, I found a thick envelope in our mailbox. Inside were handwritten letters, thank you notes from students we'd helped. One said, "Thanks to you, I got into college. I want to be someone who helps others too." Another read, "You gave me hope when no one else did. I won't waste it." Their handwriting was messy. Their spelling wasn't perfect, but their words, they were honest, pure, and they were everything I needed to hear. I pressed those letters to my chest and closed my eyes. I'd never started this to be thanked. I just wanted to make someone's road a little less hard than mine had been. But now I knew with absolute certainty I hadn't just closed one chapter. I had opened another, one that truly mattered. I never heard from Ivy again. Rumors floated through mutual contacts. Someone said she had dropped out of her residency program. Another claimed she was working night shifts in a clinic out of town. I didn't look into it. I didn't need to. I also heard that she and our mother had a falling out. Apparently, once the money ran dry, so did the tolerance. Our mother had turned on her, scolding her for being ungrateful and weak. I suppose, in the end, the cycle simply repeated itself. But I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, just nothing. They had made their choices, and I had finally made mine. My days now looked different. My phone rang with calls from guidance counselors, not guilt. My inbox was filled with stories, not demands. I spent mornings at the nonprofit office and afternoons with Maisie, helping her with homework or walking through the park. Grant remained my quiet anchor. He never needed to say much. Just one look from him, steady, knowing, was enough. One evening, we sat on a bench as Maisie raced through a field chasing butterflies. The golden light spilled across her cheeks, and her laughter rang through the air like wind chimes. I looked at them, my husband, my daughter, and felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Not the absence of noise or need, but the kind of peace that comes when you stop proving yourself to people who never saw your worth. The kind that fills you when you finally choose yourself. Maisie came running toward me, breathless, beaming. "Mom, look what I found!" She held out a tiny white flower, plucked from the grass. I took it gently, then pulled her into my arms. "You did amazing," I whispered. She leaned against me, warm and safe. And that was it, that moment, that flower, that hug, that quiet heartbeat between us. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't applause. It was life, finally mine. I had once been the sister who gave everything, then the woman who was told she didn't belong. Now I was someone else entirely. I was the founder of something real, the mother of a little girl who looked at me with pride, the wife of a man who never once asked me to be anything but myself. I was not the lunch lady anymore. I was not their sacrifice. I was my own strength,